When I came home that Friday evening, I expected silence, the soft hum of cicadas, maybe the gentle ripple of water in my pool. Instead, I was hit by the thump of bass so loud it rattled my windows. There was an SUV parked sideways across my driveway, strangers splashing in my pool beer cans on my grill, and at the center of it all, Karen Whitmore, our HOA president, wearing oversized sunglasses and a sun hat like some resort manager. She looked right at me, raised her margarita, and yelled, "Welcome to the party, neighbor. Don't just stand there, grab a drink." That was the moment I realized this wasn't some misunderstanding. It was an invasion. I stood there frozen for a second, keys in my hand, watching people I'd never met turning my backyard into a public pool. A teenager cannonballed into the deep end, splashing water across my patio. Another dragged one of my chairs toward the pool, scraping it against the concrete. My dog barked from inside, but his voice was drowned out by the music. I took a slow breath, forced myself to walk toward the gate calm and deliberate, because the last thing I was going to do was give Karen the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. When I reached her, she tilted her sunglasses down just enough to show her smug smile. "Oh, don't look so shocked," she said. "It's a neighborhood thing. We all voted your pool's basically a community resource now." I told her no one had asked me, and no one had that right. She had exactly 3 minutes to clear everyone out before I called the sheriff. Her laugh cut through the air sharp as glass. "Don't be dramatic," she said. "We're not hurting anyone. You should be proud people love your pool so much." Behind her, someone shouted, "Best pool in town," and dove headfirst into the water. My jaw tightened. I walked to the wall outlet and yanked the speaker plug out of the socket. The music died instantly, but Karen just snapped her fingers and ordered someone to plug it back in. That was the moment I knew this wasn't a spontaneous neighborhood hangout. This was something she had planned. She wanted to humiliate me, to show everyone that the HOA had more power over my property than I did. I clenched my fists behind my back, told her again to leave. She raised her drink and shouted, "Don't worry, everyone. The grumpy landlord's bluffing, party on." They cheered, and the music blared again. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anyone out. I just walked back inside, closed my door, and stared out the window. My own yard had become a circus, and I was the ghost haunting it. I pulled out my phone and started recording. If she wanted a show, she'd get one, but not the kind she expected. That night, I filed a report with the sheriff's office. The deputy on the phone sighed like he'd already heard about this. "We'll send someone," he said, "but with the holiday weekend, it might take a while." Of course it would. By the time they showed up, she'd be gone, leaving me with the mess. When the last car finally pulled away, I was left in silence. My pool was cloudy, littered with cans and towels. My lawn looked like a war zone. I remember kneeling beside my dog, brushing his fur back and whispering, "Don't worry, buddy. She just wrote her own ending." The next morning, under the harsh light of day, the damage looked even worse. Muddy tire marks tore across my driveway. Empty bottles were shoved into the bushes. And against the fence, someone had left a laminated sign, "Pool Open Hours. Approved by HOA." I laughed out loud, then I threw it straight into the trash. But that sign did something important. It solidified my resolve. This wasn't a petty misunderstanding anymore. Karen had declared war. Later that day, my neighbor Paul stopped me outside the hardware store. "You okay after yesterday?" he asked. I shrugged and he leaned closer. "Karen's telling people she's starting a pool club, says you agreed to it. She's planning a barbecue next weekend." I almost laughed. Almost. But his face was serious. "She's got people on her side," he said. "Some think it's funny. Some just don't want to get on her bad side." I thanked him and went home, my brain already churning. I bought a heavy chain and padlock for the gate. I was done playing nice. Saturday came, and sure enough, the parade arrived. Cars lined up, people with coolers and floaties. They stopped dead when they saw the gate chained shut. Then came Karen in her golf cart decorated with red, white, and blue streamers like she was leading a parade. She stomped up to me shouting, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" "Protecting my property," I said calmly. She scoffed. "You can't lock out the community." "The HOA voted." "Show me the paperwork," I said. Instead of answering, she snapped her fingers. Two of her friends pulled out bolt cutters. They snapped the chain in half while everyone cheered. I didn't stop them. I recorded the whole thing. An hour later, that video was on the internet titled, "HOA Karen Breaks into Neighbor's Pool." It went viral faster than I expected, people calling her entitled, delusional, the queen of the HOA. But the next weekend, the crowd was back, bigger, louder, drunker. I watched from my window, feeling that familiar, helpless rage building in my chest. And for a brief moment, I started to doubt myself. Maybe I was being too uptight. Maybe I should have just let them have their fun. What was I really protecting? Some water, a bit of concrete. But then I looked outside again and saw Karen holding a megaphone shouting rules to her guests like she owned the place. And that's when it hit me. It wasn't about the pool, it was about control. She didn't want to swim, she wanted to rule. That night, when the chaos finally died down, I stood in my yard surrounded by trash and heard the sound of frogs croaking from the wetlands beyond the fence. The sound was steady, natural, peaceful, and something in it sparked a wild, absurd idea. What if I didn't fight her chaos with anger, but with something she couldn't control? I started catching frogs that same night. It was ridiculous, I know, but it felt right. I set up crates in my garage, covering them with tarps, feeding them, keeping them quiet. Every croak was a promise. Meanwhile, Karen started spreading rumors. She went door to door bragging that we'd reached an agreement. She even showed up at my porch one morning with a plate of cookies and said, "Let's be reasonable, Ethan. The community needs this. We can schedule days, some for you, some for everyone else." I stared at her for a long moment and said, "I'll consider it." That one word, consider, lit her up like she'd just signed a peace treaty. She strutted away, smiling like a politician. I closed the door, leaned against it, and laughed. She had no idea she'd just given me the time I needed. Over the next few days, she printed glossy flyers, Summer Kickoff Pool Bash, sponsored by the HOA, her masterpiece, her crowning event, and I decided it would be her undoing. By the night before the party, everything was ready. The crates were loaded into my truck, the cameras set up around the yard, hidden in the hedges behind the porch posts, even one under the deck rail. I wasn't just getting revenge, I was getting evidence. The morning of the party arrived with heat thick enough to taste. Cars started rolling in around 9. Strangers poured into my yard, dragging coolers, kids, inflatable swans. Karen showed up last, riding her golf cart like a chariot, waving to the crowd with her megaphone in hand. "Welcome, everyone," she shouted from my diving board, "to the best HOA event of the summer." People cheered. Music blasted. Someone lit a grill right beside my shed. My lawn was gone, just a sea of flip-flops and beer cans. I stood on the porch sipping my coffee, quiet and visible. At noon, Karen climbed back onto the diving board, her purple swimsuit glinting in the sun. She raised her glass high and shouted, "To our summer kingdom." And that's when I moved. I walked slowly toward the truck, lifted the tarp, and untied the first crate. The croaking grew louder like a drum roll. I took a deep breath, then opened it. The frogs burst out like a living wave, hundreds of them leaping toward the pool, the grass, the deck. At first people laughed. Then someone screamed. 3 frogs landed in a woman's cooler. Another hopped straight into a man's drink. And then, as the second and third crates opened, the laughter turned to chaos. Karen's voice crackled over the megaphone. "Everyone calm down, it's just a prank." Then a frog jumped onto her shoulder. She screamed, flailed, sloshed her margarita across her chest. Another frog hit her hat. It slid down her face, stuck to her arm, and she shrieked like a siren before slipping off the diving board and plunging into the pool. Phones were out everywhere. People recording, laughing, screaming. The sound was pure pandemonium. Croaks, splashes, shouts. Kids were crying. Adults were climbing out of the pool, slipping on the slick deck. Someone yelled that it was an infestation. Another couldn't stop laughing. I leaned against the truck, arms crossed, just watching. Calm. Karen came up from the water, soaked and furious, mascara running, clutching her useless megaphone. She pointed at me across the yard and screamed, "You did this!" But her voice was drowned out by the chorus of croaks and the laughter of her own guests. A frog landed on her leg and she shrieked again, slipping backward into the shallow end. Someone caught it on video, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, slipping, screaming, flailing in a pool full of frogs. By then, people were bolting for the gate, tripping over coolers and chairs. Frogs were everywhere, hopping onto grills, bouncing into car doors, leaping into bags. It was beautiful chaos. Karen stumbled out of the pool, barefoot and furious, shouting that she'd call the police, that I'd pay for this. But no one was listening anymore. Her own followers were too busy running, too busy laughing at her. I walked forward slow and steady, raised my phone and filmed her one last time. She glared at me through dripping hair, croak after croak echoing behind her, and for the first time I saw it fear. Not of me, but of losing control. The so-called queen of the HOA had been dethroned by frogs. When the last car screeched away, I stood alone in the ruins. Frogs hopped lazily across the deck, croaking like a victory song. My pool was calm again, rippling under the setting sun. That night the videos exploded online. Karen's meltdown was everywhere, her screaming, slipping, splashing, all caught from multiple angles. The captions were merciless. The Frog Queen of Willow Creek. HOA Karen versus nature. By the next morning my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Paul came to my door, grinning ear to ear. "You've seen it, right? She's gone viral." Later that evening, the HOA held an emergency meeting. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Karen tried to defend herself, blaming me for sabotage, but every time she opened her mouth, someone played another clip of her shrieking with frogs on her shoulders. The board finally voted to remove her from her position unanimously. She left the room pale, humiliated, her once loud voice reduced to a whisper. When I got home that night, the frogs were gone back to the wetlands. The pool shimmered quietly under the porch light. My dog lay beside me, tail wagging, as if he knew we'd won something bigger than an argument. Karen never came near my property again. The HOA started focusing on actual issues instead of made-up community projects. The neighborhood became peaceful again. And sometimes, when I sit by the pool at dusk, I still hear a faint croak in the distance. It makes me smile, because that sound reminds me of one simple truth: you can't control everything. And if you try to own what isn't yours, nature has a way of setting things right.